The VA hospital in Spokane sits on a low rise off North Assembly Street, and at 5:40 in the morning in early March, when the temperature was 23 degrees and the sky had the particular darkness that precedes dawn rather than follows it, there was still ice on the concrete of the main entrance walkway that the overnight maintenance crew had not yet reached. Jared Moss was arriving for a follow-up appointment that he had scheduled 3 months ago and rescheduled twice and was finally keeping, and he had his dog with him. A 5-year-old dark brindle Belgian Malinois named Rook, who rode in the passenger seat with his chin on the window frame, and who had done 2 deployments alongside Jared, and who did not distinguish between environments that required his attention and environments that did not, which meant he was always paying attention, which Jared had come to find the most reliable quality in any living creature he had met. He turned into the parking lot. Rook lifted his head from the window frame. At the end of the row nearest the entrance, beneath an overhang that blocked the worst of the wind but not the cold, a man was asleep in a camp chair with a military-issue wool blanket pulled to his chin and a duffel bag at his feet, and his breath making small clouds in the dark. Jared drove 1 row past. He stopped the truck. He looked in the side mirror. He looked for exactly 3 seconds before he recognized the shape of the man's face. Even asleep, even after 6 years, what Jared Moss found when he walked back to that overhang, and what he uncovered about how a man who had given 22 years to the United States Marine Corps had come to be sleeping in a camp chair outside the facility that was supposed to have taken care of him, would surface a failure so specific and so documentable that it would change the way one VA regional office processed claims for the better part of a year, and it would begin with a cup of coffee and a name. If you're new to this channel, stay through this one and subscribe before you go. This is exactly the kind of story this channel tells, and there are more coming. Jared had joined the Marines at 20, which his mother had greeted with the specific combination of pride and terror that military mothers carry and almost never fully put down. He had grown up in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, the son of a man who worked timber and a woman who ran the office of a small insurance agency, and who between them had produced a son who was practical, physically capable, and constitutionally incapable of doing anything halfway. He was assigned to a rifle company out of Camp Pendleton. His first deployment was to Anbar Province in 2011. His sergeant was a man named Dwight Carver. Dwight Carver was 41 years old in 2011, which meant he had been in the Marines since Jared was 19, and Jared's mother had still been driving him to school. And he carried that history the way certain men carry long service, not with performance, not with the constant citation of precedent, but with the density of a person who has been shaped over decades by a specific demanding thing and has emerged from the shaping as exactly what the thing intended. He was 6'1" and thin through the face in the way of men who have been lean their whole lives without trying. And he had a way of delivering information in exactly the volume required by the situation and no more, which was a quality Jared had not known to value before he met it and recognized as essential afterward. 2 deployments with Dwight as his sergeant. Anbar first, then Helmand, the second tour. Helmand was the one that mattered in the way some deployments matter differently. And what it did to the men who went through it together was the kind of thing that doesn't dissolve when the deployment ends. It becomes part of the structure of who those men are to each other, a shared reference point that requires no explanation between them and that no one outside it can fully access. Jared had loved Dwight Carver the way young Marines love a good sergeant, which is a specific and serious kind of love that contains respect and trust, and the knowledge that this person's judgment has been the difference between a bad outcome and a worse one on more than one occasion. He had gotten out in 2017. Dwight had stayed in through 2019. They had texted occasionally, less occasionally, then rarely. The last text had been 18 months ago, a short exchange about a football game, nothing of substance. Jared had told himself he would reach out more. He had not reached out more. He was in Spokane now, had been for 2 years, doing project management for a construction company that built medical facilities across the Pacific Northwest. He was good at the work. He had an apartment near the South Hill neighborhood, a truck he maintained with care, and Rook, who had been matched with him through a handler program the year he got out and had been the right answer to a question Jared had not known how to ask. He kept the follow-up appointments, the ones the VA required, the ones his therapist encouraged, because he had learned the hard way that not keeping them was its own kind of decision, and not the right kind. Rook was already out of the truck before Jared's boots hit the pavement. He did not run toward the overhang. He walked toward it with the focused deliberateness of a dog who has already determined the direction of his attention and is proceeding. He stopped 2 feet from the camp chair and sat. Jared crouched in front of the man in the chair. He looked at the face. He looked at it the way you look at a face you know in a context where it should not be. The small process of reconciliation between what you're seeing and what you expected. He put his hand on the man's shoulder. "Sergeant Carver," he said. The man's eyes opened. They came to focus immediately, the way the eyes of people who have slept in uncertain places for some time come to focus, completely and without the intermediate stage of disorientation. Dwight Carver looked at Jared. He looked at Rook. He looked back at Jared. "Moss," he said. The voice was the same. "What are you doing out here?" Jared said. Dwight looked at the entrance of the VA hospital. "Waiting for it to open," he said. "It opened at 5, Jared said. "It's 5:40. Dwight looked at the entrance for a moment. "They told me to wait out here," he said. It was not a complaint. It was a statement of geography. Jared looked at the entrance. He looked at the ice on the walkway. He looked at the blanket and the duffel and the camp chair. That was not standard issue, but was the kind of thing a man acquired when he intended to be somewhere temporarily for longer than temporary. He stood. "Come inside with me," he said. "I've got an appointment at 7, Dwight said. "Then we'll wait inside," Jared said. "Come on." Dwight Carver considered this for a moment with the considering expression of a man who has a system and has been asked to adjust it. Then he stood from the camp chair with the careful economy of a man whose body has opinions about cold mornings but has not yet been given permission to express them. And he picked up the duffel bag, and he came. Rook walked on his other side. Have you ever seen someone you admired? Someone who had been a fixed point in your understanding of what strength looks like? And found them in a circumstance that stopped the air in your chest? Tell me about them in the comments. I read every one. Inside was warm. The morning lobby staff were at the desk. Jared found 2 chairs in the waiting area away from the main intake desk, and he went to the vending area and brought back 2 cups of coffee that were not good coffee, but were hot, and handed one to Dwight, and sat down. He waited. He was good at waiting. He had learned it in 2 deployments and had refined it since. Dwight drank the coffee. He looked at the lobby. He looked at Rook, who had settled at Jared's feet and was monitoring the room with amber eyes. He said he was trained for patrol. Detection 2, Jared said. He's retired. You get him through a program? Handler transfer, Jared said. 2 years ago. Dwight nodded. He drank the coffee. He said nothing for a while. Jared did not push. He had learned from Dwight himself how to sit in a silence that was working. After a while, Dwight said, I've been out here 3 nights. Jared said, Okay. I had a room, Dwight said. Boarding house on Spruce Street. The owner sold the building. New owner doesn't take monthly. He said it with the same evenness he used for everything. Facts in order. I'm working with the VA on housing. They said it would take time. How long have you been working with them? Dwight looked at his coffee. 7 months, he said. 7 months. Jared looked at the intake desk. He looked at the lobby that was now filling with the morning's appointments. He looked at his old sergeant, who had done 22 years in the Marine Corps and who had managed to be in a camp chair outside the institution responsible for his housing and his care for 3 nights in March in Spokane, Washington, because a process had taken 7 months and had not yet reached completion. He said, I want to understand what's holding it up. Dwight said, You don't need to do that. I know, Jared said. Tell me anyway. Over the next hour in the VA lobby, with the morning appointments filling the chairs around them, came out with the careful precision of a man who has been managing a situation and has organized it into a form he can present without it becoming something he has to feel too much of in public. The claim, a combination of disability rating appeal and housing assistance application, had been filed 7 months ago by a VSO representative named Al Turley at the Spokane Veterans Service Organization office. The initial decision had come back with an error in Dwight's service dates that had required a correction submission. The correction had been filed. It had been assigned to a claims processor. The processor had left the regional office. The claim had been reassigned. The reassigned processor had requested additional documentation that Al Turley believed had already been submitted and was in the file. Al had resubmitted it. That was 6 weeks ago. Since then, silence. Al had called 3 times. Al had been told the claim was under review. Under review. 7 months. A man with 22 years of service in a camp chair in 23-degree weather. Jared said, "Is Al still working your claim?" Dwight said, "He's good people. He's doing what he can." Jared said, "I know. I'm going to call him." He called Al Turley at 8:15. After Dwight's appointment, in the parking lot with Rook beside him and Dwight inside getting his labs done. Al answered on the first ring with the voice of a man who picks up every call because every call might matter. Jared introduced himself. He said he was a Marine. He was a veteran. He had found Sergeant Dwight Carver sleeping outside the VA that morning, and he wanted to understand what could be moved and what couldn't, and what specifically was in the way. Al told him. He told him in the organized, frustrated detail of a man who knows exactly where a process is jammed and has not been able to reach the hands that are jamming it. The additional documentation request, Dwight's complete service medical records from his final deployment, which was Helmand 2018, had been submitted twice. Both times the records had been received by the regional office. Both times the processing notes indicated they had been received. Both times the claim had subsequently requested the same documentation again. Al believed the records were being received but not correctly associated with the claim file. An administrative error that, if true, was correctable in a matter of hours by someone with file access, but that required someone with file access to take the action. Jared said, "Who has file access?" Al said, "The regional director's office, but getting there without a congressional inquiry usually takes..." "What's the regional director's name?" Al told him. Jared wrote it down. What Jared did next was not complicated in concept. It was the kind of work that requires patience and specificity and the willingness to make the same call to a different number until the call reaches the person who can do the thing. He had a lunch break. He had a cell phone. He had, as it turned out, the number of a woman named Congresswoman Linda Voss's District Constituent Services Office, which had been given to him 2 years ago by a colleague whose brother had had a VA claim issue and which he had kept in his contacts under a label that said VA Emergency, because he had known, in the way that veterans know certain things, that he would one day need it or know someone who did. He called the Constituent Services Office at 12:15. He described the situation. The staffer who took the call, a young woman named Caitlin who had a veteran father and who had heard variations of this particular story more times than she could count, said she would flag it for the regional director's office and follow up. She called back at 2:45 to say the flag had gone through and the regional director's liaison had confirmed the file association error and was correcting it and that the claim should move to final review within 72 hours. 72 hours. 7 months, and the actual correction had taken 1 afternoon. Jared drove back to the VA at 4 o'clock. Dwight was in the lobby where he had waited through the afternoon for a secondary appointment that had run long in the way VA appointments run long. He was in the same chair as the morning. Rook went directly to him. Jared said, "The file association error is being corrected." Caitlin from Congresswoman Voss's office flagged it to the regional director. "You should hear from Al within a day or 2. Dwight looked at him. He said, "You didn't have to do that." "I know," Jared said. Dwight looked at Rook, who had put his chin on Dwight's knee and was staying. He looked at his hands. He said, "I would have worked it out." "Yes," Jared said. "You would have." He paused. "You also don't have to." Dwight said nothing for a moment. Then he said in the same even voice he used for everything, the voice that had told Jared what to do and how to do it in 2 countries and in conditions where the instructions needed to be clear, "I don't know how to ask for help." He said it like he was observing a fact about himself, like he was conducting an honest inventory. The lobby was quiet around them. Morning appointments had gone home. Evening shift was just beginning to fill the chairs. Rook had not moved from his position. Jared said, "Neither did I, for a long time." He paused. "You're the one who told me that asking wasn't weakness. You said it was operational. You said the mission required it." Recognition. The look of a man hearing his own words returned to him in the moment they cost him something. "I said that," Dwight said. "You did," Jared said. "I wrote it down. There was a pause. Then Dwight said, very quietly, "I should have called you." That was all he said. Jared did not add anything to it. Some things are not improved by more words. Al Turley called Dwight on Thursday. The claim had moved to final review. The housing assistance component was approved, pending one final verification. The disability rating appeal was still in progress, but the documentation gap had been resolved and a decision was expected within 30 days. Al had a transitional housing contact at a veteran-specific residence on the north side of Spokane. Not permanent, but warm, staffed a place designed for exactly this interval, and could have Dwight in a room by Friday if Dwight said yes. Dwight said yes. The 30-day disability rating decision came in 26 days. The rating was adjusted. The adjustment triggered a retroactive payment that covered the 7 months of processing. Dwight received it without drama. He paid 3 months ahead on the transitional housing. He put the rest in an account. What neither Jared nor Al had initially known was that Dwight was not the only veteran with an active claim at the Spokane VA regional office who had experienced the same file association error. Caitlin, from Congresswoman Voss's Constituent Services Office, had flagged the systemic nature of the issue after resolving Dwight's case. She had seen the pattern before, had documented it, and had used Dwight's case as the specific named example in a formal inquiry to the regional director's office. The regional director's office initiated an internal audit. The audit found 11 active claims with the same error, spanning 8 months. All 11 were corrected within 2 weeks of the audit completion. The VA's regional office revised its file association protocols. The revision was noted in an internal memo that Caitlin requested a copy of and kept. None of this was the news. None of it made a headline. It was the kind of correction that happens in the middle of processes when someone with access decides that access is for using, and it is not remarkable to anyone who wasn't sleeping in a camp chair in 23-degree weather when it was still unresolved. There was a dinner at the VSO Hall on the north side of Spokane the first Saturday in April. Al Turley organized it, which was the kind of thing Al organized because the VSO Hall had a kitchen and because people who had been through something needed a meal more often than they needed a ceremony. Dwight came, Jared came with Rook. Caitlin came because Al had called her and said you should come, and she had. There were 11 veterans in the room and their family members where they had them, and a few people like Patricia, Al's wife, who had made 3 different casseroles and did not need to be asked. Who came because a table needs people at it? Dwight sat at one end. Jared sat near the middle. Rook was under the table with his chin on whoever's foot he had most recently assessed as requiring his presence, which cycled through the evening with the democratic thoroughness of a dog who has decided that the room is his and that his responsibilities are distributed accordingly. At some point in the evening, Al stood and said a few words about the claim, about the correction, about what had taken 7 months and what had taken 1 afternoon once it reached the right hands, and about the 11 other veterans who had not known their claims were stalled and who were now moving. He said it simply, without performance, the way a man speaks when the room already knows most of it, and what's needed is acknowledgement rather than explanation. He did not call it a victory. He called it what it was, which was people doing what they were supposed to do, eventually, because someone did not walk past a camp chair. Dwight did not speak at the dinner. He ate. He listened. He laughed once at something Al said, and it was the genuine kind, not performed, not polite. He had the look of a man who had been outside for a while and had come back into the room and was remembering what rooms were for. There are moments that feel less like coincidence and more like arrangement. A follow-up appointment rescheduled twice and finally kept. A parking lot row chosen, and one passed. A dog who lifts his head from a window frame and points. What Dwight Carver required was not charity. He was not broken. He was owed something that a process had failed to deliver, and the failure was administrative, not inevitable, and the correction took 1 afternoon when it reached the right hands. What took 7 months was not the complexity of the claim. It was the distance between the claim and the person who could move it. A distance that was not Dwight's to close alone, because he did not have access, and because the men who have spent 22 years learning to manage alone are the last ones to ask for the bridge. What Jared Moss did was park the truck, walk back, crouch to eye level, say a name. He did not drive past the camp chair. This story is for every Dwight Carver, for everyone who served completely and is now navigating a process that was supposed to be the other side of that service and has not yet arrived, and for everyone who has a sergeant or a mentor or a father or a friend who taught them what strength looks like and who may not know that they are allowed right now to call. If you know a veteran who is navigating a VA claim or who has stopped navigating one because the distance got too long, tell them about the veteran service organizations in their area. Tell them about Congressional Constituent Services offices. Tell them the correction, when it reaches the right hands, sometimes takes an afternoon. Is there someone in your life like Sergeant Carver? Someone whose strength you relied on, who is now carrying something alone that they don't have to carry alone? Tell me about them in the comments. I read every one. Every story on this channel is about choosing not to look away. If that means something to you, subscribe and be here for the next one. There are more worth telling. Which moment in this story stayed with you? I'll see you in the comments.